and welcome to this new tutorial. In today's tutorial, we shall talk about evolution or development of international relations as an academic discipline. आप सबका स्वागत है इस नए ट्यूटोरियल में और आज के इस ट्यूटोरियल में हम लोग समझेंगे और जानेंगे evolution और development of IR as an academic discipline. Well, this tutorial is gonna be a very long tutorial, so I will request every one of you that please stay tuned to understand how international relations have evolved as an academic discipline. आप सबको ये बोलना चाहूँगा पहले कि ये ट्यूटोरियल थोड़ा लंबा जाएगा, क्योंकि अगर आपको IR को एकेडमिक डिसिप्लिन कैसे इंपॉर्टेंस मिली अगर ये समझनी है तो प्लीज़ इस ट्यूटोरियल से बने रहिए अंत तक, तभी आपको जाके समझ में आएगा कि how IR became an independent autonomous discipline. So let us start this new tutorial. तो फिर चलिए शुरू करते हैं evolution or development of IR as an academic discipline. Although international relations as a traditional feature of mankind is as old as the state itself, yet its study as an autonomous discipline is a compulsorily recent origin. In fact, this discipline is so new that it can be called as the youngest of all social sciences. And the primarily reason for this is the First World War. The First World War resulted in unparalleled destruction and devastation of almost every country in the world, with millions of lives lost. Perhaps a proper estimate can never be done. Moreover, total economic collapse, widespread famine, and rampant diseases continue to add to the death toll. It is from this traumatic experience of the First World War that the inspiration to study IR as a separate academic discipline grew. So, when we talk about the evolution or development of IR as an academic discipline, we have to understand that although international relation as a tradition or a traditional features of a mankind is really old, it is considered to be as old as a state itself. But when it comes to studying IR, it is comparatively a recent origin. In fact, many times scholars have been saying that it is one of the youngest subject in the space of social sciences. And the reason primarily have been to study IR is obviously the First World War. And why First World War? Because First World War resulted in unparalleled destruction and devastation of almost every country which was involved in this, and this also added to millions of people who lost their life. And therefore, the traumatic experience of the First World War eventually inspired many people to study about the international relation, to talk about the international relation, and this is how it eventually grew as a separate academic discipline in the world. जब हम evolution और development of IR as an academic discipline की बात करते हैं तो हमें ये समझना है कि जो IR है वो बहुत पुराना है, वो almost as old as state की तरह, मतलब जब से state तैयार हुई है तब से international relation एक concept बनकर उभर आया है. लेकिन उसका जो स्टडी है एज एन ऑटोनोमस डिसिप्लिन, एज ए सेपरेट डिसिप्लिन, वो कंपैरेटिवली रिसेंटली हुआ है. रिसेंटली माने बेसिकली जब फर्स्ट वर्ल्ड वॉर शुरू हुआ, और फर्स्ट वर्ल्ड वॉर शुरू होने के बाद जो डिवास्टेशन और डिस्ट्रक्शन जो सामने आया उससे बहुत से देशों को हानि हुई है, और स्पेशली वो देश बहुत बर्बाद हो चुके थे जो डायरेक्टली इन्वॉल्व हुए थे. इसके अलावा लाखों लोगों की लाइफ भी इसमें चली गई है, और ये जो एस्टिमेट है वो अब तक क्लियर नहीं हुआ है कि कितने लाखों लोग मरे हैं. इसके अलावा जो इकोनॉमिक कोलैप्स भी हुआ, वाइड स्प्रेड फेमिन भी हुआ, और डिजीज़ एकदम स्प्रेड करने लगी, और इसके चलते और भी ज़्यादा मौतें हुई. अभी हमें ये समझना है कि ये जो फर्स्ट वर्ल्ड वॉर हुआ उसका जो इफ़ेक्ट था वो बहुत ट्रॉमेटिक था, और इस ट्रॉमेटिक एक्सपीरियंस की वजह से आगे चलकर इंटरनेशनल रिलेशंस को एक ज़्यादा इम्पोर्टेंस मिला और ज़्यादा इम्पोर्टेंस मिलने के बाद ये एक सेपरेट एकेडमिक डिसिप्लिन करके तैयार हुआ और इसीलिए फर्स्ट वर्ल्ड वॉर इज़ वन ऑफ द मोस्ट इम्पॉर्टेंट रीज़न व्हाई टुडे वी हैव international relations as an autonomous discipline in the social sciences. And moving forward, and immediately after the First World War, its study was initiated by the North American and the West Europeans. Furthermore, for the historical references in the origin of IR, it can be traced to the writings of political philosophers such as Thucydides, who was an ancient Greek historian who wrote a history of the Peloponnesian War, and IR is also been cited in the writings of Chanakya's Arthashastra and Nicholas Machiavelli's The Prince. However, as we have talked about IR as an academic discipline in its own way, well, it came into be studied after the horrifying experience of the First World War. Now we have to be remember that before the First World War, IR had always existed as a branch of history, law, philosophy, political science and other related subjects. Now when we talk about IR, we also have to remember that immediately after the First World War, there was a study was initiated by North Americans as well as Western European countries. और आगे चलते हुए हमें ये भी पता लगता है कि हिस्टोरिकल जो रेफरेंस है वो बहुत पुराना है, वो ट्रेस होता है इन पॉलिटिकल फिलॉसफी ऑफ Thucydides, who was an ancient Greek historian who actually covered the history of the Peloponnesian War, and he mentioned about international relations in his writing. Similarly, even in Chanakya's Arthashastra, we get reference to international relations, as well as later in Machiavelli's famous work, The Prince. He also speaks about international relations. Now, this is about historical reference, just to highlight. Now, further, we also remember that IR actually came in academic discipline only after the First World War, and more or less it was existed as a branch of history, law, philosophy and political science. So before First World War, IR was talked as a reference or as a branch of history, law, philosophy, political science and etc. And therefore we need to understand that only after the First World War IR actually took that face or took that shape which is today we are talking about. अगर हम हिस्टोरिकली रेफरेंस का देखेंगे कि IR कैसे एक डिसिप्लिन बनकर तैयार हुआ, तो उसका जो फर्स्ट रेफरेंस हमको मिलता है वो हमको मिलता है थुसिडाइडस, जो एक एंशिएंट ग्रीक हिस्टोरियन थे। उनके राइटिंग में उन्होंने पेलोपोनेशियन वॉर के बारे में लिखा था, तो उस उनके लिखावट में इंटरनेशनल रिलेशंस का रेफरेंस मिलता है। इसके अलावा इंटरनेशनल रिलेशन को अर्थशास्त्र में भी साइट किया है चाणक्य ने, और बाद में निकोलस मैकियावेली ने भी IR के बारे में लिखा है उनके फेमस बुक द प्रिंस में। सो अमूमन जो IR था पहले विश्व युद्ध के पहले वो एग्जिस्ट करता था, लेकिन वो ज़्यादातर हिस्ट्री में उसका रेफरेंस हुआ है, लॉ में होता था, फिलॉसफी में और पॉलिटिकल साइंस में। उसका कभी भी एक इंडिपेंडेंट डिसिप्लिन बन के वो तैयार नहीं हुआ था। पहले विश्व युद्ध के पहले उसकी जो असल जो परिभाषा है, उसका जो फेस है, उसका जो इमेज है, वो चेंज हो गया आफ्टर फर्स्ट वर्ल्ड वॉर। सो देयरफॉर वी ऑल्सो हैव टू रिमेंबर दैट IR एज अ डिसिप्लिन इवॉल्व ओनली आफ्टर द फर्स्ट वर्ल्ड वॉर। लेकिन ये भी बात बहुत इम्पोर्टेंट है कि फर्स्ट वर्ल्ड वॉर के पहले हमें कुछ हिस्टोरिकल रेफरेंस भी मिलते हैं IR के, जो बहुत कम है और उसका कोई इंडिपेंडेंट वैल्यू नहीं था। Meanwhile, in 1914, the history faculty of some universities in the United States organize lecture courses on the regional history of the Far East and Latin America, on diplomatic history and US foreign policy, and topics like foreign trade, international exchange, and foreign investment were incidentally taught by Department of Economics. So what we need to understand here is that just before the First World War, as we have just been talking about, that IR has always been there, but it existed as a branch of various subjects, and therefore in 1914 the history faculty of some universities in the United States organized various lecture series or lecture courses on the understanding regional history of Far East and Latin America, diplomatic history, as well as US foreign policy, and topics like foreign trade, international exchange, and foreign investment were incidentally being taught by the Department of Economics. So here we can understand that IR was there, IR has been taught about, but not as an academic in autonomous discipline, but as a related or a branch of these subjects. So पहले विश्व युद्ध से पहले 1914 में हिस्ट्री फैकल्टीज ऑफ सम यूनिवर्सिटीज इन द यूनाइटेड स्टेट्स ऑफ अमेरिका, वहाँ पर उन लोगों ने कुछ लेक्चर सीरीज या लेक्चर कोर्सेज शुरू किए थे, और ये जो लेक्चर कोर्सेज थे ये अमूमन रीजनल हिस्ट्री के ऊपर थे, जैसे कि फार ईस्ट, बाद में लैटिन अमेरिका, या फिर डिप्लोमेटिक हिस्ट्री और यूएस फॉरेन पॉलिसी के ऊपर भी था। इसके अलावा जो टॉपिक थे जैसे कि फॉरेन ट्रेड, इंटरनेशनल एक्सचेंज या फिर फॉरेन इन्वेस्टमेंट, ये जो टॉपिक्स थे ये इंसिडेंटली डिपार्टमेंट ऑफ इकोनॉमिक्स में कवर किए जाते थे। तो हमें ये पता लगता है यहाँ पर कि जो आईआर का जो कॉन्सेप्ट था वो ऑलरेडी एस्टैब्लिश किया गया था विश्व युद्ध के पहले, लेकिन उसकी जो एक इंडिपेंडेंट सोच रही है, उसका जो एक ऑटोनमस स्टेटस रहा है, वो हमें मिला पहले विश्व युद्ध के बाद। सो इसीलिए हमें ये समझना है कि जो आईआर एज अ डिसिप्लिन है वो हैज़ बीन देयर फॉर एवर, इवन मच बिफोर द फर्स्ट वर्ल्ड वॉर। It has been spoken, it has been talked about fairly in a large number, but it never been understood as an independent autonomous discipline. The independence as an autonomous discipline in academics only evolved after the First World War, and therefore now we are going to talk about what are the development which happened, which actually made international relation as an autonomous institute or as an autonomous discipline only after the First World War. So, after First World War, the first chair of international politics was founded in 1919 at the University College of Wales in UK. In fact, this chair is also been named and known as Woodrow Wilson Chair of International Politics. Well, several prominent historians like Alfred Zimmermann, C.K. Webster, and E.H. Carr, and etc. were the early occupants of this chair. With this, the seed of international relations as an autonomous academic discipline was sown. In fact, in addition to this, in the year 1920, the rise of USA as a global power encouraged the teaching of international relations as an independent subject. At the same time, in the USSR, it was not recognized as a separate discipline even after the Second World War. Similarly, in Afro-Asian countries, its studies was gradually started by different universities after the process of decolonialization. So, what we need to understand here, that in real sense, IR got its space, IR got its autonomous understanding as a discipline only after the First World War, and this happens with the first chair of international politics when it was founded in the University College of Wales in UK in 1919. So this chair became the first instance where IR would be taught henceforth as an independent discipline, and this chair has also been named after Woodrow Wilson Chair of International Politics. Now, there has been various scholars who have taken this chair and who has contributed a lot for the independent growth as an academic discipline of IR. And these people were Alfred Zimmermann, C.K. Webster, E.H. Carr, and etc. So these are some of the known prominent historians who took up this responsibility to help in a way to grow this subject, and therefore this chair is considered to be the seed of international relations as an autonomous academic discipline. Moreover, by 1920, the rise of US itself encouraged teachings of international relations as an independent discipline in United States of America, whereas in USSR they never recognized IR as an academic discipline or a separate academic discipline even after the Second World War. Similarly, in Afro-Asian countries, basically talks about Africa and Asian countries, the study of IR gradually started in various universities, and this process started only when they gained their independence or at the point of decolonialization. So this is how IR as a new discipline began its journey after the First World War. पहले विश्व युद्ध के बाद जो सबसे पहली जो एक चेयर को स्थापित किया गया वो यूनिवर्सिटी कॉलेज ऑफ वेल्स यूके में किया गया 1919 में, और ये चेयर वुड्रो विल्सन चेयर के नाम से भी जानी जाती है। और जब ये चेयर शुरू की गई तब से बहुत से फेमस हिस्टोरियन ने इसका दारोमदार या फिर रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी ली थी, जैसे कि अल्फ्रेड जिमरन, C.K. वेबस्टर, E.H. कार और बहुत बाकी फिलोसोफर्स थे या फिर हिस्टोरियन थे जिन्होंने IR की ग्रोथ के लिए बहुत योगदान दिया। और इसी के चलते आगे ये जो चेयर थी यूनिवर्सिटी कॉलेज ऑफ वेल्स में, ये एक शुरुआत बन चुकी थी। इसका जो बीज था इंटरनेशनल रिलेशन का वो यहाँ पर उन्होंने डाला था, और आगे चलते हुए 1920 में जब अमेरिका एज अ सुपर पावर राइज हुआ तो अमेरिका ने और एनकरेज किया इन अमेरिकन इंस्टीट्यूशंस कि वो वहाँ पर इंटरनेशनल रिलेशंस के बारे में बताएं, बच्चों को सिखाएं, और ज़्यादा अवेयरनेस करना बहुत ज़रूरी था। वो अमेरिका ने अपने देश में कर दिया। उसी दौरान जब USSR की बात आती है, विच इज़ बेसिकली टुडेज रशिया, तो वहाँ पर IR को सेपरेट रिकॉग्निशन ही नहीं मिला था। इवन आफ्टर सेकेंड वर्ल्ड वॉर IR डिड नॉट अट्रैक्टेड दैट इम्पोर्टेंस एज एन एकेडमिक डिसिप्लिन और एज एन ऑटोनोमस डिसिप्लिन इन रशिया। वो बहुत देर के बाद हो गया। सिमिलरली जब हम अफ्रीका और एशियन कंट्रीज़ में देखते हैं तो वहाँ पर जो IR के बारे में जो एक अंडरस्टैंडिंग बनी वो बहुत स्लोली बनी, और ग्रेजुअली एशिया और अफ्रीका में यूनिवर्सिटीज़ जो थे उन्होंने ग्रेजुअली IR को पढ़ाना शुरू किया। और ये जो प्रोसेस था बेसिकली वो शुरू हुआ डीकोलोनियलाइजेशन के बाद, मतलब उनको जब आज़ादी मिली कॉलोनियल पावर से, उसके बाद ही इंटरनेशनल रिलेशंस के बारे में एक अंडरस्टैंडिंग हो गई कि ये सब्जेक्ट इंडिपेंडेंटली पढ़ाना बहुत इम्पोर्टेंट है। और उसके आगे चलते हुए अफ्रीका और एशियन कॉन्टिनेंट में IR के बारे में पढ़ाया गया, और ये शुरुआत जैसे मैंने बोली इंडिपेंडेंस के बाद हो गई। सो दिस इज़ हाउ IR एज एन एकेडमिक डिसिप्लिन बिगेन immediately after the First World War. Furthermore, after the Woodrow Wilson Chair of International Politics at the University College of Wales in 1919 was set up, after this there were various other chairs which were set up in and around the world. Now let us identify and learn which are the other chairs which were set up in the world after the First World War. And we have examples like there was International Relations Chair in Jerusalem in 1929. Then we have Oxford University in 1930. The London School of Economics got its chair in 1936. Then the University of Edinburgh got it in 1948. Then we have in US the School of Foreign Policy in Georgetown University in 1990, a School of IR at University of Southern California in 1924, and the Institute of Advanced International Studies, and this was in Paris in 1923. So these all chairs what we see were very important, because by promoting this study in international relations, there was a belief that it would be possible to bring some amount of peace among the nations. And therefore these institutes, these chairs which came after the Woodrow Wilson chair in the University College of Wales in 1919, played a very important role. And therefore we have to remember that Woodrow Wilson chair of international politics in the University College of Wales in 1919 is considered to be the important seed which was laid down for the growth of international relations as an academic discipline. And these institutions are the examples that now IR has taken its own pace, and it is growing as an independent autonomous academic discipline. So वुड्रो विल्सन चेयर ऑफ इंटरनेशनल पॉलिटिक्स जो यूनिवर्सिटी कॉलेज ऑफ वेल्स में लगाया गया था 1919 में, उसके बाद बहुत से सारे यूनिवर्सिटीज़ और कॉलेजेस ने आगे आकर आईआर के बारे में पढ़ाना शुरू किया। तो उसके बाद आता है इंटरनेशनल रिलेशन जो जेरूसलम में शुरू किया 1929 में, ऑक्सफोर्ड यूनिवर्सिटीज़ में शुरू हो गया 1930s में, द लंदन स्कूल ऑफ इकोनॉमिक्स में 1936 में चेयर को स्थापित किया गया। उसके बाद यूनिवर्सिटी ऑफ एडिनबर्ग 1948 में एस्टैब्लिश किया गया। एट द सेम टाइम इन यूनाइटेड स्टेट्स और स्कूल ऑफ फॉरेन सर्विसेज एट जॉर्जटाउन यूनिवर्सिटी 1919 में उसको स्थापित किया। उसके बाद स्कूल ऑफ आईआर एट यूनिवर्सिटी ऑफ सदर्न कैलिफोर्निया 1924 में शुरू किया, और द इंस्टीट्यूट ऑफ एडवांस इंटरनेशनल स्टडीज़ ये जो पेरिस में है इसको 1923 में शुरू किया गया। तो ये जो सारे जो इंस्टीट्यूट है या फिर यूनिवर्सिटीज़ है या फिर कॉलेजेस है यहाँ जहाँ पर भी ये आईआर एज अ ऑटोनोमस डिसिप्लिन को शुरू किया गया, ये एक शुरू हुआ था एक पर्सपेक्टिव से कि आगे चलकर ये प्रमोट करेगा इंटरनेशनल पीस के बारे में, और स्टडी ऑफ आईआर विल हेल्प द वर्ल्ड बाय एंड लार्ज टू प्रमोट पीस among the nation. So this is all about how the various institutions were formed to study international relations as an autonomous discipline. Well, apart from this, there were several research bodies which were established, and these are as follows. So in United States in 1910, Carnegie Endowment for International Peace was established at Washington, D.C. Here it organized conferences, exchange of scholars, and promoted and published research papers. Then we have the Union Democratic Control of 1914. Here they basically did a good work in England for the exchange of international relations as an academic discipline. Then in 1918, two research bodies in New York were formed. These were Foreign Policy Associations and Council of Foreign Relations. The aim of both is to stimulate wider interest in international relations, policy issues confronting the US, and encourage more participation in world affairs by the citizens. Fourth, we have Royal Institute of International Affairs was established in 1920 in London. It had affiliated institutes in Canada, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, and Pakistan. And it introduced its annual publication called Survey of International Affairs and a quarterly journal titled International Affairs, basically promoting study and research in international relations. Then we have New Commonwealth Institute, which was set up in London in 1934. This was subsequently renamed as the London Institute of World Affairs, and it released its journal called World Affairs. By 1935, we have a research organization by the name of Institute of International Affairs, and this was formed in Paris. And in India, a non-governmental organization, that is Indian Council of World Affairs, was established in New Delhi in 1943 for promoting interest in foreign relations and world affairs. It also came up with a publication journal called India Quarterly. So these are some of the most important research bodies which were established in fact to carry out research in international relations, and these research bodies actually highlight that now, after the First World War, there has been a considerable rise in understanding the international relation as an independent autonomous institute, and therefore research bodies plays a very important role as far as IR is concerned. Now moving forward, beside this, the League of Nations also played its role in developing IR as a separate subject. In fact, the League encouraged the study by its work as a forum of international discussion and by its sponsoring a series of international studies conferences through its institutes of intellectual cooperation. So, to a large extent, after the First World War, League of Nations also played a very important role to develop IR as a separate subject, because League itself encouraged and promoted forum for international discussion to various countries so that they avoid any future conflict or a war. And later we have a Second World War, and after Second World War came a new technology called nuclear technology. We got the United Nations organizations, and we also got something called political independence for Asian, African and Latin American countries. And these three developments eventually led to the rise of international relations as a totally independent autonomous discipline. And therefore, after Second World War, issues such as nuclear proliferation became a factor which even today people are discussing about in international relations. Question of war and peace became the key issue for mankind. Political and military impact of nuclear energy have opened up new frontiers for the study of IR, and in fact these studies has already moved from a merely an academic curiosity to the very defense of human civilization in a nuclear age. So these are some of the events, developments which actually happened after Second World War, that it led to a totally different nature of IR altogether. And therefore today we in very right way can say that IR, international relations, is one of the most important academic discipline which will help every student, which will help everybody. If they learn this, then they will understand how the entire international dynamics are all about, how countries are interacting with each other, and what are the issues which has become most important part and parcel of understanding international relations. So this was all about the evolution and development of international relations as an academic discipline. I hope you have understood this topic. I shall see you in next tutorial. Till then, take care.